Now, there are continuing reports about a sudden spike in armed robberies and related crimes in Lagos and Ogun States following the implementation of a lockdown directive by President Muhammadu Buhari on the two states and, of course, the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. Now, consequently, the top commands of the Nigerian police have been ordered by the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, to arrest the situation and bring it under control. But given the peculiar circumstances of the lockdown and a history of mistrust between the police and the general public, a lot of Nigerians have expressed concern at the manner of enforcement of this ongoing lockdown. For a wider discussion on this, we are now being joined by a man who has a bit of history with police himself and the mode of operation in Nigeria. Segun Awosanya is a civil rights activist who has become a very familiar face among Nigerians when it comes to putting a spotlight on issues of police brutality and more. Welcome to the program. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Segun.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Bati.
Welcome to the morning show. Quickly, what's your assessment
you,
of how the Nigerian government has been handling the security dimension of COVID-19? Only yesterday, the Inspector General of Police spoke at the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 briefing, and he pointed out that his men are ready to ensure that there is no criminality and there is no anarchy on account of COVID-19. But the other part of it is that there have been reports of not just police brutality, but also brutality on the part of soldiers in parts of the country. What have you seen so far, and what do you think should be the priorities, both for the police and other security agencies?
Thank you very much, Dr. Bati. I believe that there are so many things that we will eventually be learning from this pandemic. And one of it is the way we engage the people. Everything doesn't have to be militarized. When the people are suffering from lockdown anxiety, they need to understand why this is in place in the first instance. Why do we have to enact the Quarantine Act in order to keep people indoors? And one of the most important reasons is to stop and to ensure that we don't have the spread of this pandemic and we don't overwhelm the system. Our health structures are not so good and not as aware, for us to be able to combat this. So we don't want to overwhelm that. And to do that, we're trying to tell the people that we're doing this because of their safety. And to do that, we need to understand the various issues, the critical issues that the people are facing. And they are in three folds. Apart from the pandemic itself, we have insecurity, we have hunger. And all this can be triggered by the anxiety on ground. Number one, the palliatives and the relief materials that governments are spreading around is not getting to the people. A lot of it were politicized in distribution. People are giving it to their loyalists, and some people are just outrightly stealing these things. And when police are out there to secure the lockdown, criminalities are all over the place because people cannot run away from the pandemic death and also go and be confronted with the death through hunger. And a lot of people are hungry enough to say, I'm ready to die, today, if I did not eat anything. And I will not die in the house. I would rather die trying to get something to eat. So, of course, it has led to a lot of crimes. It has led to a lot of people, gangs, coming around and robbing houses and the rest of it. And we have to get involved in this because we know that the authorities will not respond until there is a full-blown crisis. And one of the things that we were advocating for us at that time, even before the chaos that we have already forecasted, is the police themselves. They are members of the society. Most of them don't have the personal protective equipment themselves. They are not kitted. They are not even, there's nothing protecting them from being infected themselves. Some of them have not eaten. Some of them don't even have food. Some of them don't, once they report to work, if they manage their logistics to get to work at all, they may not eat from the beginning from morning till evening because there's nowhere to buy food. So with these kind of people on the street, even if there is peace, anybody they find on the road will become mincemeat because they will really want to exploit that person or extort that person in order to be able to feed themselves or to make ends meet somewhat. So this is one of the reasons why we're saying we cannot continue to focus on the rural poor, claiming that you have given them money, while the urban poor, who cannot even go to farm to feed themselves, don't have any alternative than to go and commit crime. So this is precisely what we're saying. So the handling of this, if you are going to score it, is still below par. We have not even started at all. Because what we are doing right now is putting guns on the street in order to prevent people from actually committing crime. but it's not going to stop them from dying from hunger in their homes. It's not going to stop violent crimes, domestic violence in the house, in the home. It's not going to stop people stealing from themselves within the community. We don't have enough police officers to man or to correct this. We need to do the needful and lower the anxiety level. And the only way to do this is for government to show transparency. We cannot just continue to be guessing that by locking down everyone, we can win the war against the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not just about that. Because it works in another country doesn't mean it's going to work in Nigeria. We must find a model that works for Nigeria. And whether it's going to be partial lockdown with curfews or it's going to be total lockdown with serious palliatives and alternatives and relief materials getting to almost to everyone through local governments and all, we must do something. On the task force, on the COVID-19 task force of the government, there must be people who are connected to the pulse on the street on that board. You cannot be working with things that you don't know. You cannot be working with a society that you're not connected to. That is exactly why we're having the gaps that we're having today.
Certainly, we're seeing several gaps, and you've raised a number of issues that we'll dissect over the course of this conversation. You spoke about the welfare of our officers, which is a very important point, because at the end of the day, our officers as well need to feed themselves. Now, I'd like to bring in a situation here. We've seen unrest over the past few days in areas like Agege, Agula Egba, Iyana Ekpaja, also areas like Alagbado, and there's been a lot of unrest across Lagos and Ogun States. Now, citizens have had to literally create vigilante groups to protect themselves with their own machetes, etc. They've called on the police. The police are unable to respond because, like you said, the police themselves are also overwhelmed. There are not enough police in the police force for us to even rely on the police enough. Now, the Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has come out to say that he is basically going to, or he has already put in an intervention force in Lagos and Ogun States that will be headed by the Deputy Inspector General of Police in those areas. Do you think this is enough to mitigate the situation? And how do you see citizens reacting to this new intervention force over the next 2 weeks of lockdown?
Well, the IG have tried his best. He has responded because we haven't gotten an avalanche of calls from these troubled areas. We had to escalate through the police complaint response unit, which actually gave a report to the IG, which facilitated the deployment of the special units. Now, before the special units were deployed, our divisions, they don't have operational funds enough to man the lockdown as well as run criminal investigation simultaneously. So some of them don't even have fuel in their vehicle to engage the ongoing or the civil unrest that we are actually faced with. So because of that, a special squad needs to be put in place. But again, how long do we think this will last? It won't last, because after a while, the same intervention squad that was brought will start constituting nuisance on our street. Because at some point, people will still need to go out to go and check themselves somehow, to go and get food. People will still need to go out to go and restock. People will still need to go out for one thing or the other, with permission. And with this, even doctors and nurses are being harassed on the street. So like I said, when you put men of war on a peaceful street, they are going to cause chaos. So one of the reasons why we cannot just rely on the deployment of this alone is to continue to show transparency to the people and let them know why government is doing certain things. Lagos State is actually doing a phenomenal job by ensuring that every single thing they do, they carry the people along, using people who are not even party stalwarts or people who are not loyalists to the party, getting the words out there and showing the people that they are for them. This is what Nigeria must do more on the national scale. But our police officers themselves must be learned and are cautioned enough to know that they are not on the street to kill people in order to protect them from being killed by the virus. They are there to ensure that law and order are not broken and people don't breach the lockdown rules. So I think through monitoring, organizations, civil society groups and all must continue to do what they have been doing. But this time around, they must do it committedly and wholeheartedly to ensure that they monitor these people so that they don't breach the peace, so that they don't infringe on human rights. Even though we're on lockdown, our human rights and the human right is not under lockdown. We must still observe human rights. We must observe the fact that human beings are who they are and they are hungry as well. So they're dealing with different fears: hunger, insecurity, and the pandemic itself. So government must work harder and speed up the rate at which they get relief materials to these people. If relief materials are coming to them, and they are not starving in their homes, why will they be outside in the first instance risking their lives? So this is what we need to mitigate, and police themselves need to caution the men and continue to educate them on the reason why they are out there. Under normal circumstances, we shouldn't be having military men on our streets because that calls for concern. Police can still do this if national orientation is working, if government is sincere, if we have also an epidemiological model that justifies our stay at home. That, look, this is why we're doing this. If we do nothing, 1 million Nigerians will die within 1 week. But if we do what we're doing now, at least we can reduce that number to 100,000. Nobody will want to be a part of that 100,000. So they will listen to what you're saying. So, but now we don't really have a study. We don't have any science that we're working with. All we're just doing is everybody is locking down in other countries, and we want to lock down as well so that we can keep the pandemic off the street. While people are now exposed to insecurity and now exposed and also to hunger. So we need to, while government is focusing on preventing, testing, and treating, they must ramp up the tests so that people can begin to have some good news, at least, to see that their sacrifices by staying at home is actually yielding fruit somewhere. So while they are doing that, with time, by the time we know why we are staying at home and we're getting relief materials, government can now focus on checking, tracking, and tracing. So this is how it's done in sane society, but not just putting guns on the street for no reason.
Well, Segun Awosanya, to be fair to government at all levels, a lot has been done in terms of informing the people that there is a pandemic that kills very quickly and that poses a threat to the whole of humanity. On a daily basis, the Presidential Task Force briefs Nigerians. State governments have been doing all kinds of, have adopted all forms of communication methods just to let the people know that there is danger. But in spite of this, you find some kind of resistance on the part of Nigerians. Left to the average Nigerian, he would like to go out. Left to the average Nigerian, he would prefer to go to church and go to the mosque. Many Nigerians are skeptical about social distancing. What do you think is responsible for this? Because this is not about hunger. Is it a predilection towards suicide? Or do people just think that Nigerians are invincible? What have you seen that may be responsible for this resistance to reason and science on the part of our people?
Oh, okay, sir. Basically, when you're dealing with a pandemic, it's a new thing in this part of the world in terms of for this generation anyways. Aside from what happened 100 years ago and then the Lassa fever, the one we have in Lagos State, the bubonic plague and the rest of it. Now, today we live in an engagement age. People they don't listen to information. You don't inform the people in a time where emotions are high, where sentiments are out there. You engage them. And I believe Lagos State government is doing a lot of good with that. People need to be engaged because people naturally don't trust the public officials or anything from government. You need to use mediums that they listen to. You need to use people that they listen to. You need to use different means through which you can get across to them and work with them. With this, they have a sense of ownership in what is going on. They understand what is at stake. And then with your transparency, they trust you enough to want to even contribute to what is going on. And I think this is where the gap lies. Government can speak on TV from now till tomorrow. If the people don't see themselves in the equation, if they don't see the bigger picture, if they don't see where they can contribute, if they don't see what is coming to them from government based on trust, if they don't have that connection, if that thing is not airtight, people will still want to go out and say, why am I staying at home? I can't come and die. And precisely that's what we're seeing play out now. So probably we need to review this. We need to look at it a different way on how to engage Nigerians, to make them feel, look, this is about you. If you stay home, you have a higher chance of not spreading the pandemic because we have asymptomatic carriers or cases who don't even know they are sick. And by the time they get in touch with you, you become one of them. And then you go and infect your parents, you go and infect your children, you go and infect your loved ones. When people hear it from that perspective, from people that they readily trust, they will understand what is going on. And then with the palliative, no matter how small, getting to them, they will find themselves in the midst of the entire equation. I tell you this, people don't buy product because they see billboards out there, because they watch a beautiful advert. No, they buy product because people connected to them in their immediate network have said one thing or the other about it, or have given a testimony about buying and using that particular thing. So with that, they have more faith in their network, and with that, that goodwill will rub off on that particular product. So when government is sending out information and they are using mainstream media and the rest, it actually have a limit to which it can have direct impact on the people, especially when we're dealing with urgent matters as critical matters like a pandemic. So if it's going to work, you need to use where the people are. You need to engage the people where they are and win trust with that. Police cannot be abusing people and you expect the people to respect the same police while they are running away from hunger. It's going to cause chaos. So we need to review this, and government must listen. And one of the reasons why how this thing can work is for them to actually involve people who the people trust in the system. The task force, the COVID-19 task force, must have people within the civil society involved in it so that they can actually hear directly how the people are feeling and know what to do to get through to the people, not just the media itself, not just the noise on the radio. People need to be engaged, and there are ways in which that is done.
Certainly, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And one demographic of people that I'm now going to bring into this is prisoners that are now being released. Now, the Minister of Interior, Rauf Arigbisola, announced in a press conference last Thursday that the first batch of prisoners had been released, being 2,600 people. Now, a lot of these were elderly people, people who were sick, or people who had genuinely just been awaiting trial for years. Now, without adequate palliative measures for people like this, at the end of the day, they're only going to end up, it's possible that they will end up resorting back to crime, right? Now, this is of serious concern because this is not just prisoners being released, but also natural citizens that we're also seeing as well who are robbing food stores, etc., because citizens are hungry. So my question to you is, how do you see this amnesty intervention by the government actually playing out over time if they don't provide the right palliative measures and support for the prisoners they're releasing?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I believe we started that campaign that our prisons must be decongested at this point. Because as you know, we are preaching hand wash. We're telling people that they should raise their awareness about hygiene, that they should continue to wash their hands with soap and water so that they won't infect themselves based on what they have taught. Because we know that this virus stays on surfaces for days. And if it's kept in a cool area, it can actually last for more than for a lot of hours. So based on that, people who are in prison don't even have access to water. People who are in prison don't even have access to soap. And if they're just in prison awaiting trial, there's no point keeping them there. This is the best time to release them into the society. But of course, there were conditions to that. If you are releasing prisoners into the society, the people in the society themselves, they must be well off in terms of palliatives. They must be well off in terms of relief materials, enough to have people who are coming out of prison to join that particular hub in society. If not, people who are coming out of prison, they are still in prison in their mind. And that need for why was I released from where I have at least 1 meal per day. And you are releasing me into the society where I have nothing to fall back upon. So if modalities are not put in place to take care of those people, there will be more crimes in society, and it will defeat the purpose of releasing them in the first instance. But it's actually a good call for us to decongest our prison, because we can begin to develop another hub of infections from there. Because you know that they engage with prison officers, wardens, who go back home to their families, who infect their families as well. And then from there, police officers who interface with this within the criminal justice system also gets these things. So when they detain innocent people who are not even criminals, they transmit all these things around. And at the end of the day, the purpose of the lockdown will be defeated. So one of the things that we're still saying is that government must ensure that they definitely at this point in time, government cannot do it alone. Civil society organizations, firms, individuals with capacities must go beyond just donating big money to make themselves feel good that they've done something for society or during this pandemic. They must also create initiatives that are workable, that are closer to the people, so that these things, that the palliatives and relief materials that are being given by government, can actually be strengthened with their own contribution. So, and this is what responsible organizations have started doing in collaboration, and this is what people must do in order to ensure that crime rates are actually reduced in our society at this point.
Well, I'm aware that you are part of a foundation that is raising funds and also providing support for the poor and the vulnerable. I guess it's called the Social Intervention Advocacy Foundation. And you seem to be doing that in collaboration with some other groups. Do you want to talk a little about that? What level of support you have received? and what activities you've been able to embark upon since that foundation was announced.
Yes, sir. For the Social Intervention Advocacy Foundation, what we basically do is stand in the gap, institutional gaps where governments have failed. So what we're doing is telling the people you can't afford to be despondent, you can't afford to lose hope, but you have a system that can cater for you even if government is not there, or at least to strengthen government efforts and also strengthen institutions. As you have been seeing, the activities with the police over the years, we're providing the bridge over the communication gap with the people and the public and the police themselves. And with this, we're also extending this to the vulnerable in society. You see, when we are under a pandemic, and we're under a government that is not actually connected with the people, we are all vulnerable because we are susceptible to a lot of things. So with this, we're now extending this at this point to say, look, people need food. You can actually give people money now, but some people may not even be able to access money because ATM machines around, human beings have to put money in those machines. And so in some places, they just don't work. And some people even get robbed while trying to get money from ATM machines. So why don't we provide a link, a means through which people can actually get food at their doorstep without crowding any environment? So what we did, what our initiative is doing in collaboration with Ruby's Microfinance Bank, is that we had a clarion call for all organizations who are feeding the poor, who are feeding the vulnerable, who are going to IDP camps, and said, okay, everybody come together under one umbrella. Let's know those who are giving funds to the urban poor. Let's know those who are giving food to the urban poor. Let's know those who are going to the rural poor to provide materials for them, give them sanitizers and the rest, and also educate them about what is going on. So everybody have their own purpose. So they came under a hub where we can now sanitize the way we engage society. For Social Intervention Advocacy Foundation's COVID-19 Food Fund, what we're doing is we are coming together to liaise with people who have access to food materials and those who have access to stock that we can actually buy. Then we're looking at areas across Lagos, Abuja, and all those places where the national lockdown has been announced. And we look at areas where they are being compliant with the lockdown. And we'll knock on doors and put food stuff that will last them for a month at their doorstep. This is what we're doing now. And this is what we're gearing for or preparing for across Lagos, across Abuja. And we're trying to let people know that it pays to listen to instructions. It pays to listen to order, especially an order that saves us all, that protect the future of our children. And that's precisely what we're doing. We're not looking at throwing bread in the crowd. We're not looking at going to a field and asking people to come and beat themselves up for a morsel of bread. No, we're not doing that. We're going from house to house and giving families things that are tangible enough to keep them for the period, provided they stay indoors. And that's exactly what we're doing, preaching the social distancing message in a way that rewards the public.
Well, certainly this sounds like a great house-to-house initiative, which brings me into another house-to-house initiative that I'd like us to discuss. Now, the Lagos state government have announced that there is going to be a house-to-house symptom search for possible cases of COVID-19. Now, as of now, it is underway, and we do know that they do have about 119 people with possible symptoms. Now, this is an initiative that has potential, but there are also leakages, especially when it comes to security. And this is a great issue for a lot of us right now. So I wanted to ask you about that. Do you think that this initiative poses a threat to security? And if so, how can the Lagos state government make this initiative more secure? Because, I mean, with 119 symptomatic patients so far, it does kind of seem like maybe this is an initiative that can work. What do you think?
Well, my thoughts generally about that is that the reason why African numbers are very low is because we don't have access to testing. But if we are able to ramp up the number of tests that we carry out, we're going to be able to identify more people who already have symptoms, who have developed symptoms over the incubation period, and also more people who may be asymptomatic but must have had contact with people who are symptomatic. So, I mentioned something earlier on. I said the job of government initially, when this thing broke out, why they are having partial lockdown and the rest, is to ensure that we prevent this. We test those that we have identified and treat people in order to discharge them back into the system. But when you discharge people back into the system where social distancing is not being practiced, there is a likelihood of them being reinfected. And in order to protect them from that, we have routine checks, which is what the Lagos state government have started doing now. Knocking on doors and checking people, and then also tracking. There are people who have had contact with people who have been seen to have COVID-19 virus within them. but they have not been able to trace them. So tracking them and then tracing them enough to know how many people they themselves have contacted. So with this, they're doing this with the security authority, with the authorities at the security level, ensuring that while they are doing this, they're telling people, making people know that this is to our own advantage. If people have this thing, the reason why you're staying at home is to ensure you're not spreading this. And if people are already living with it and sneaking out once in a while to go and gather, to go and drink, to go and do stuff, they are risking the lives of other people. And we have the elderly amongst us. We have the children amongst us. We have people who we love amongst us. And it would not be fair for us, even if we don't care about ourselves, to infect the people around us. So I think this is one of the reasons why government is taking this initiative. And I believe it will work if, and only if, government expand on, one, carrying the people along, engaging them rather than merely informing them. Secondly, ensuring that palliative measures and relief materials get to people enough for them to trust government to the point of opening their doors and saying, come and test us just in case there's any problem. And I think we will go far if we do this. And the more we do, the more tests we do, the more numbers we get, and the easier it becomes for us to win this war against the pandemic.
Well, briefly, before we go, I'm aware that you've been calling for support for the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. You've been asking people to oppose any call for his resignation. Calls for his resignation have been coming from the U.S. Congress, some members of the U.S. Congress. And then, of course, now we have the information that the United States has suspended further funding for now to the WHO. And the United States blames Dr. Ghebreyesus for supporting China to hide information and for not doing what he's supposed to do. What's your take on that, quickly, before we wrap up?
I believe Dr. Tedros is a prisoner of conscience, I'll put it that way. He's someone who is trying his best to ensure that the COVID-19 pandemic does not become a political war. Of course, there have been so many sentiments all over the place. There have been so many issues, debates all over the place where people are saying this is a war between China and America. This is a war between the world powers. This is a war about dominating the world or dominating the world economy. And so many things have been said. And the true job of WHO and the DG of WHO, somebody who is saddled, who is in the middle of it all, is not to take side. His job is to ensure that politicians don't take over the narrative and distract the entire world and infect the entire world because they want to manipulate the information for their own good. So this is one of the things that he has been trying to do. And focus also, if you notice, he's doing less of reaction. He's actually responding to the crisis, and he has continuously said that the world should focus on the real enemy. And the real enemy here is COVID-19. The coronavirus is the real enemy, not Dr. Tedros, not WHO, not the fuel or the battle or the gap between China and America, not the battle of disinformation of the world powers, but about the people that live in the world and about the future of our children. So with that, I believe it is commendable that we support, and I believe it is necessary, it is imminent, it is responsible for us to support somebody who has not given in to the pressure of politicizing the war against the pandemic, and enable him to focus and build on what he has done, what he has achieved, and what he's working on right now in order to save or to rid the world of this pandemic. You don't expect him to start saying things based on what people want to be true. He has to say things based on what the scientists are telling him, what the structure, what the people, what the body of knowledge is saying. And remember, in our part of the world, when we're fighting fake news, we clamp down on people, clamp down on rights, clamp down on newspapers. But of course, globally, and if you look at the way the WHO is working, they're actually fighting fear with facts. And they're actually working with platforms and platformers and organizations to ensure that anything on coronavirus is linked and sent and retract and redirected to the WHO site so that you can actually get the real information instead of susurus and lies and propaganda and disinformation that will actually fear.
Thank you very much, Segun Awosanya.
Thank you.